Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new episode of ET Titan Talks. We have today with us Santosh Iyer, MD and CEO of Mercedes-Benz India. Our focus today with him will be luxury and leadership. Who is the Indian luxury customer? How do they make purchase decisions? How do they behave when they enter a showroom? And have their preferences changed over the last few years? On leadership, we'd like to understand from him, how does a leader behave when it comes to leading such a luxury brand? How does the top-end Mercedes brand as a leader sustain its growth? And within the luxury segment, how does the leader lead with values? Welcome to ET Titan Talks. Today we have with us Santosh Iyer from Mercedes-Benz India. Welcome, Santosh, to ET Titan Talks, and thanks for taking time out to have a chat with us. So let me dive immediately in. You had a record year in the 2024 financial year, 18,000 plus units sold for Mercedes. You're number one luxury car player. What made these numbers for you? What really worked, or what ticked for you to achieve these numbers?
So, firstly, again, thanks for having me here. And I would say that for us, numbers is an end outcome and it's not the target. So, we never play that we need to be leading the market, we need an X number. I think if you do the right things, the numbers will be an outcome. And we have been in India for 30 years. And in this 30 years, we have done more than 2 lakh cars in India. The last 1 lakh cars have come in last 6 years. And 1,50,000 cars have come in the last 10 years. So if you see, the growth is significant in the last 6 to 8 years time. And here a lot of credit on one side goes to the way our product strategy has been, manufacturing strategy, also our retailing model that we came in the market. On the other side, we have to give credit to the economic growth also in the country, because the per capita GDP going up from 1,500 to 2,500 clearly shows more purchasing power, more HNIs coming up, different demographics. So I think a combination of these two, doing your stuff the right way, what is required by the customer, and on the other side, a bit of macroeconomy supporting, a lot of legislative changes like GST coming in, really helps drive luxury consumption as well.
Compared to all the other luxury car makers in India, there have been many new entrants which come at different price points.
Yeah.
They want to appeal to the either younger, rich, nouveau riche customer, or the staid old luxury buyer. And you've spent 16 good years with Mercedes. Can you help put together a picture of the Indian luxury buyer?
So, when we look at the market, we categorize them into two portions: the luxury dweller, super HNI, highly traveled, they understand luxury, they have been consuming luxury. Some of them are born in a luxury household where they have access ever since childhood as well. And then there is the first time entrance into luxury. So if I look at the percentage for us, we have 60% of them will be the luxury dwellers who have a right taste. They understand things, even they understand products sometimes even better than my sales guys. And then there is another India which is actually coming in straight into consuming luxury, and that's the fundamental change we see. There is a laddered approach. You were in mass market and then you slowly get into a luxury segment. But yesterday I got a message from a 24-year-old guy in Jaipur. He said, I'm the startup, I'm intending to buy an S-Class, I follow you on LinkedIn, and he wanted something. So that's also in India. Within this segment of first time buyers, there are logo seekers or brand seekers. They are happy with maybe any luxury brand at a right price or a good price. They are okay. And then there are some discerning customers who feel, I've dreamt for this for many years. Now when I buy, let me buy the better ones, and whatever is the case. So again, that's the kind of consumers we would like to target.
The luxury dweller who's born in luxury, right? How has that dweller changed over the last decade or maybe decade and a half in your understanding?
So in the last 10 years, I would say the biggest change is the knowledge level among these consumers. They are much more aware of what's happening in the world. Thanks to maybe the much more exposure on the digital side and travel. The second is they are much more restless. So earlier, if I could get a car to India, say 12 to 18 months after the global launch, now they want that in 6 months in India after the global launch. So
So they want the latest.
they want the latest there. They want to individualize also. So 90% of our business is built to stock, which we build, and of course we give options to customer. But the top end customer, if you see, they're much more demanding in individualization, personalization. Their involvement in the buying decision is much more deeper than what it used to be. So you also mentioned the EV topic, but the EV is more about the powertrain options. Purchasing reason for an EV is a bit different there, coming from a great value. Because today, thanks to the taxation in India, EV cars are in most of the states a great value purchase. When you look at a combustion engine car, in terms of the price value equation, it's great, and the TCO is great. Plus, I think what the government has done is a green number plate, right? So I can have a Mercedes Benz, but does it have a green plate? Because then I can also. Customers are not ready to pay a premium for sustainability. That's also clear. They are not ready to pay that premium. So as long as the price point is same, they will shift, or even better, they even shift faster. I think these are nuances when you look at the HNI, Ultra HNI, that they are looking into more of a powertrain decision. But in general, much more matured, much more learned, much more demanding as well.
This brings me to the other category, the bucket of luxury entrant. The luxury entrant today, you're saying that more and more people are joining the luxury entrant segment. Is that because of Indian economy sort of trudging the way it is, 6+ GDP growth every year, or is that due to K-shaped economy, which a lot of economists today talk about?
So, as I said, the data proves clearly that there is a GDP growth happening and clearly, even if you now for a moment take that GDP numbers with a pinch of salt, you don't know what it is. But one of the things that I continuously see is the tax collection. That can't change. And that GST collection is one sacrosanct figure which just shows the value addition happening in the economy. So, month on month, year on year, you can see that happening. So there is some value addition happening there. And also double income families. I should clearly say that, it's not the single income which is driving. When both the husband, wife now are earning, then they feel, why don't we have also a luxury car at home? We both share, maybe as such. And that's also sometimes driving that much earlier shift to luxury than what it used to be in the past.
CEOs today are saying that Indians are ready to upgrade and would like to upgrade. There's a very clear shift towards premiumization.
No, surely. I think we have discussed, there is no entry-level car in a Mercedes-Benz across portfolio. Even if I look at a GLA, which is around 55 lakhs, I give a Airmatic, I give, the standard, much more bells and whistles, because we don't go with this entry pricing strategy and then upgrading the customer because they want to buy a brand, a product which has everything there. 5 years back, our top end vehicle sale, which is now 1.5 crores upwards, that used to be hardly 10 to 15%. Today, more than 25% of our sales are cars costing more than 1.5 crores. The next segment, which is, we call it the core luxury segment, consists of the C class, E class, GLE, and GLC as well. These cars cost from 60 lakhs to 1.5 crore. There, 65% of customers are there. Our entry for Mercedes-Benz is hardly 8 to 10%. So, which used to be 15 to 20% couple of years back. So that clearly shows our customers shift.
So your biggest chunk lies at 60 lakhs to 1.5
Yes,
crore.
yes. That's the meat. E-Class is still the best-selling car in the luxury car industry.
While your entry segment is 50 lakh plus. So you're saying that even your customer chunk has shifted from the entry level to the mid level.
Yes, yes.
They've premiumized, they've upgraded, so to say.
Exactly.
In that sense. But to sustain this segment, right, for the longest time, does it depend still on economy, or does it depend on how the global geopolitics and landscape shapes? I'm sort of moving gears now towards tariff and its impact thereby, if at all, on your industry. While you're a German company, so there are no tariffs as of now.
Yeah.
But the global landscape, there is very clearly Europe, which is going to get impacted because of the 25% tariff imposed by US. is this an opportunity for the India business to start making much bigger difference and add to the global balance sheet of Mercedes-Benz? Is that an opportunity or is that a challenge?
So we have to distill two things. Number one, some of the geopolitical developments and tariffs is beyond a business's control, right? We have to adapt our business based on what's happening around us. The good part is Mercedes-Benz had always a big manufacturing setup in Alabama in the US. We sell 300,000 cars, 3 lakh cars there. 1.5 lakhs we produce in the US, and 1.5 lakhs we used to import, and 1.5 lakhs we used to export out of US. So it was a net neutral ecosystem that we always followed, and now we have to rebalance based on the current tariff situation, which is the case. But I think currently there is a clear realization that only make in India may not work. We have to make in India for the world. And this is why if you look at the already the India-Australia FTA, India, UK,
FTA.
which has been signed recently. And I think there is a very big anticipation on the India-EU FTA as well. Because what will change now is India gets access to markets which has money in the pocket. That's something important as well. I think we have a very competent component industry and also very strong OEMs with a very outstanding cost structure. So very cost competitive.
But with the FTA, there is common perception, if I may call it, that if we get an EU FTA, we've already done UK FTA, does the luxury car become cheaper for the Indian consumer?
I think that's the biggest fallacy. What has happened is there is a lot of Instagrammers who have gone up and they have taken a price of a car, divided it by 110% duty and multiplied it by 15% and saying this is a new car price. Now everything becomes cheaper.
You crashed so many hearts by saying no.
But let me explain, clearly.
It ain't getting any cheaper.
No, because firstly, let's talk about us. 92% of the cars that we sell in India are locally produced, and they even the components that we import attract a 15% duty, which is similar to FTA world. Tomorrow, FTA is not going to be 0 for 0; it will be 10-15% graded over a period of time. So let's say 92% of the business there should be not any impact, 0. Then comes us 8 to 10% CBU business that we have, that we import all these fancy AMGs, Maybachs and all that stuff. Is the price. What could change is today the customer of this G-Wagon, he has to wait for 12 months to 18 months because of the market-based pricing, our allocations are limited. Tomorrow, if we are able to price it, the price remaining the same, the duties are different. Maybe I'm able to get this car much more for the customer, customization and many other options codes. And maybe some impact on price. I won't rule that out, but it's not what the social media today is raving about, that the prices are going to crash and India will get some cars at different prices.
Let me shift gears to the EV cars. Today, you clock about 8% of your sales in the EV segment. The national average is about 4.5%. Why does Mercedes sell more EV cars than the national average percentage?
So, two reasons. If you see the luxury industry overall, and not only us, but even our competitors, I think to give credit, all of us got a lot of models on EVs to start with. So, a customer has an option. So, amount of options available for the customer in the luxury car space model. So, if I say the total luxury car market has around, say, 70 odd models in offering, locally produced and imported, out of which there are 10-15 EVs available. If I look at mass market, there may be 500 models available in terms of options, equipment and others, and out of which only say 20 models are available for a customer. Also, point of sale. Today, all luxury outlets sell an EV. If you look at mass market, only 20% of outlets in India sell an EV. The inflection point is there. If mass market brings more EVs, you will find more consumers also bringing it.
Even the luxury car buyer, he or she is also preferring EV. That's what I want to understand. Why are
Not
they
really.
choosing EV?
Not really.
For them, mileage doesn't matter, right? Then what is it that works for them?
So there are two levers. Number one, they have been driving, our customers drive an EV in other parts of the world when they come in here, because once you live with an EV, you want to continue to live with an EV. The second is pressure from kids and family to shift to a better decarbonized mobility option. And the third is TCU. You can say it's not the mileage, but the initial purchase price of the car is a bit cheaper compared to combustion engine. The G-Class electric today is 3 crores. The combustion engine is 4.5 crores. So why don't I buy a G even though it is electric? I still get the G feeling and I still don't compromise, and it's a very great value proposition that I have. So that also drives EV consumption to a large extent in the luxury segment.
Let me shift now to Indian customer psyche. We've seen value buyers, we've seen luxury car buyers. We've seen earlier sedan selling, the entry segment selling, and then we saw a quick shift in the last 3 years more so, a tall boy SUV preference. Is that something that's happening also in your company? Are SUVs selling more than the sedans?
So let me talk about our share. We are 55% SUV and 45% is sedan.
And so when did you cross 50%?
Say 2 years back, it was 50-50, and then the SUV started going higher. But having said that, the best-selling luxury car in India and our own portfolio is the E-Class long wheelbase sedan that we have. I personally am a big lover of sedans because there is nothing to compensate the sedan feeling on an SUV. It's just law of physics. If you are traveling, commuting.
Is the legroom same in both?
Yes. In fact, the seating position in a sedan is even better. And much more comfortable, much more better. But as I said, the psychographically, it's a value for money metal, and then you want to have that bigger sized, you want to feel a dominant position in the road because of different road users that's around. And it's not only for luxury, but even mass market, you can see a similar trend this year. But mass market is witnessing MPV trend as well. So they can see the SUVs are actually not growing or degrowing a bit, but MPVs, usually not much. We don't have we have some 7-seater cars, but they are not MPVs, they are classical SUVs. So that's, I think, more to do with rationalist thinking. But if still there is, as I said, 45% of the 19,000 cars we sell are still sedan. So sedan is very much alive as well.
You've started something called Retail of the Future. Right?
Yeah.
What is Retail of the Future, if you could help us understand, and do you sustain that method of selling today?
So, when we were in that COVID period, just entering there, and we were looking at what should be our strategy for India in the long run. And when we went to customers, you look at the pain point. The pressure point is the dealer will try to sell what they have in stock. There's a push. High level of discounting, which means there's no price transparency between one dealer to the other dealer, and customers are shopping across. Huge impact on residual values because the cars are discounted like hell, and then the RVs crash. And look at the dealer now, because in India we have so many automotive dealers who have closed down because of over trading. They have stocks with them, they report wrong retails, then the bankers come after them, and they have actually closed shop. And we have a huge history of non-profitable dealers because of over trading in this business. All of this affects customers because the fundamental business model, and I should say this, and some of my peers won't love me for this, because it was don't make money in sales, make money in service. When we thought about the retail of the future, we said, number one, unlike some of the American brands who have now set up, who feel there is nobody required, I will sell directly to the customer. We should not do that. We need franchisee partners because India is a large geography. Customers need to hold on someone. Somebody needs to be closer to the customer. Second, we shifted to an agent model where we hold the stock. We ensure that we determine the price. We may have discounts, customer profile wise, as well as specific model run out, but it is standard, transparent. We show it online, offline. So customer has an option to come online, offline, no negotiation, because these are all fixed. This really helps to bring down the time for sales. It also helps dealers to be profitable. And then the only reason, like we are in Delhi today, and if we have 3 partners here, the only reason that the customer should buy from partner A, B or C is who is giving me better service after I buy the car, or who is closer to me. Proximity. Or service level. So then you go and check a Google review and say, hey, who is better or who is offering me post-sales experience. So we have changed the game significantly.
So you determine the price point.
Yes, we determine the
Company
price.
determines.
Yes.
The dealer can't out.
No, they are agents now. So they are no longer dealers because they don't carry any risk. They don't carry any stock. There is no push, and retails are determined by what is registered in Vahan, not by what they declare to us saying, I sold these cars.
In a way, they are running experience centers.
Exactly. That's
Right.
Absolutely. And that's a shift in focus. We want to be an experience delivery company and not a car delivery company. And that's a fundamental change in the. Then only you can live up to luxury. Huh?
But-
Otherwise, it's just a figure of speech.
What's in it for the dealer to be with you, to stick with you, if they're only running experience centers?
No, because they make money to start with. They are entrepreneurs. They make money. Secondly, there is a.
Aren't those margins also fixed beyond a point?
But they are fixed. But the more you sell, the more you make money. Secondly, they are still making money in parts business. It's not like the
Right.
customer service business. But they are not dependent on customer service business to break even or make money. So we have decoupled it.
What are the attributes of a leader when it comes to a brand?
Our idea is to be the most desirable brand, and that's the core. And we are the most valuable luxury car brand in the world. So we have to think and act like a luxury brand to start with. Otherwise, we will do the wrong things. And I keep giving examples of airline companies in India which went bankrupt just chasing market share numbers and stuff. So we need to be absolutely clear. And that being the most desirable brand can only happen when you keep the customer in the center of what you do. As long as the next generation kid dreams of the three-pointed star, our jobs are secure, the brand is secure, and we are able to go forward. So that's a meta level that we need to think. So any decision that we take has to ask that question: are we thinking and acting like a luxury brand? And if we do that, I think rest is an outcome of what we do.
What do you depend on? Is it value system? Is it behavioral? Or is there something else in your playbook of a leader as an individual?
For me, the foundation is integrity. That's something, and then the performance, there will always be. Organization is like a wardrobe. You will need different kind suits as well as tracks and joggers. So you cannot say you need only one set of. You need that diversity in thinking, in culture, and everywhere. But the foundational layer is integrity to start with. That's a zero tolerance area. The second is in today's time even more relevant is the flexibility and the agility because organizations can only survive in this current context if they are agile, if they are flexible, and that's it's not easy. It's easier said than done, I would say, because
So the leader also needs to be agile and flexible.
have to be significantly, and it has to be reflective, because maybe the decision that we took 15 days back, they say you have to be the creator and destroyer of what you do yourself. So the humility has to be there to say, hey, yes, maybe that was done in that context, but the world has changed around, and if you still are so passionate that I did that decision and now I need to stick, maybe we are steering the ship. More so in automotive industry, it's like a real anecdote of ship. You start steering it. It takes time to take the right course, and hopefully you have steered it in the right direction, because it goes for a distance before you are able to change the course again. So I think the flexibility, agility has to be prerequisite today for any leader, in my personal view.
So I'll come to the last segment of this. These will be quick, rapid fire kind of questions.
Yeah.
What does luxury mean to you personally?
I would here use a quote of Coco Chanel: luxury starts where necessity ends.
When it comes to leadership, what do you go back to?
I think there is a famous quote, and also my former colleague used to always say this to me: if you want to go far, you can run fast, but if you want to be successful, take people along with you in this journey.
SUV or sedan? What's your choice?
Sedan, I mentioned earlier. I love it.
What is the model of Mercedes that you prefer most, but you don't drive it today?
So, I love the S-Class. I was not driving for last 2 years the S-Class, but actually 3 days back I shifted to the S-Class finally because I just love it and I couldn't, stop the temptation. I was always on an EV. I will again shift back to the EV for 2 years. I was driving and I will again shift back. But this S-Class temptation, I said, no, I need to get in. Yes, but personally, if I have to drive the car, then it's a C63 AMG. It's a squirrel on steroids, you can say.
Right. You worked in multiple companies. You worked in a Japanese company. You worked in American. Now you're working with a German company.
Yeah.
What is that one Indian value and attribute that you still find common across all these cultures?
In all of these organizations, I have seen, in general, Indians never say no as well. And I think that's when I worked in these three cultures as well. Maybe those cultures also realize that you need to really go deeper. There are different types of yes in India, and therefore in all these cultures now they have realized that the degree of the yes is different, and they need to yes and nod as well. Yeah.
Right. So is that cultural nuance that you had to sort of unlearn or learn when you were dealing with people? Because across different cultures.
For me, it's very easy because I have worked in different parts of India. I speak 4-5 languages, Indian languages as well. And therefore, it's much more easier to understand. But for me to explain to colleagues, I've worked in these three cultures and maybe trying to make them understand, he said this because they meant this. They don't get that sometimes because, in Germans, it's straight. You can have a feedback and you can clearly say, hey, you are bad. It's fine and accepted. But sometimes the going around way of giving feedback is not in Germany. But in Japanese culture, you never give a feedback. You are much more reserved in that feedback culture, more respectful and hierarchical as well.
More respectful than even the Indian?
Indian culture has evolved very fast. I would say, if you look at many cities now, let's take an example of school. When I studied in school, my parents couldn't think of giving a feedback to my teacher. Today, you go to a school and the teachers are overloaded. In fact, they are under pressure, under parents giving feedback why the school or why the teacher is not up to the mark. In 20 years, it has changed so drastically. Because it was hierarchical. Earlier, a guru, you cannot go and tell, hey, you taught wrongly. And today, that's not there. And it was very core to our value system. If you see that, you'll never challenge your guru, right or wrong.
Right. Great. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, Santosh.
Always a pleasure.
Fantastic
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.